It's sometimes said that after 25 plus years in the public eye, nothing new can be discovered about Hillary Clinton's personality. And yet, because she's running for office of president, it's worth asking again, and perhaps with fresh eyes, what is Hillary Clinton's temperament? The Enneagram is an ancient system with 9 numbers around a diagram. Ennea means 9. Today, it's used as a highly effective personality typing system. In the personality Enneagram teachings, there are 9 core or archetypal temperaments, 9 Ennea types. Each of the 9 Ennea types is its own worst enemy, and it's also, when integrated, a gift to the world. Using the system of the Enneagram, I conclude that Hillary Clinton is running the Type 1 pattern, what I call the perfectionist reformer. Among other things, the Enneagram Type 1 habitually dampens down their pleasure sensitivity. This allows the Type 1 to do the hard and sometimes difficult work of shaping themselves, of improving themselves and others in the world. They can literally turn their energy into controlling their impulses and molding them into something that's poised and civilized, and can therefore make a good contribution to the world. And they work so hard to make this good contribution. This makes ones on the high side incredibly wise and reasonable and objective and hardworking and dedicated, doing things on behalf of all of us. And on the low side, it can make ones kind of uptight and tense and sort of overly critical and judgmental. Consider this clip from ABC's The View, in which Hillary Clinton is asked about her personality.
But I know you, and I find you so warm and lovely and authentic. And yet there are people out there who have this idea that you're not trustworthy, that they don't like you for some reason. What is that about, in your opinion?
You know, Joy, obviously I've thought a lot about it because I don't like to hear it, so yeah. I need to figure out what's behind it. And, you know, I think some of it is that, I am perhaps a more serious person, a more reserved person than is kind of in the public arena these days. And so I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the kind of way I conduct myself, that way I was raised, frankly, to conduct myself, and kind of what goes on in the world today. So I think people then say, well, you know, she's serious, she's reserved. Can I really like her?
But what is inauthentic? What's inauthentic mean?
I don't understand that. I don't understand that, because I've been pretty much the same person my entire life, right, for better or worse.
I think Hillary Clinton is really onto something here when she connects her personality qualities of being serious and reserved to these questions about trustworthiness, and I would include her authenticity. Now, she says she got these qualities from her upbringing, but they also happen to be very common Type 1 characteristics, particularly when the Type 1 is leaning into the wing of the Type 9. Now, she's saying that because she's reserved and serious, that maybe people aren't connecting with her and they maybe not liking her, and I guess the implication then is that they won't trust her. But then she's left kind of baffled as to this question of authenticity. But I see these qualities of being serious and reserved as being related to this air of inauthenticity in this way. The Type 1 can be so careful and so striving towards trying to be perfect, trying to be good, that they can actually have this disconnect between what they're actually feeling in their gut and actually what they're presenting. There's a kind of screen. This is called the defense mechanism of reaction formation. This happens when the one is feeling an impulse which is unacceptable, probably because it doesn't conform with the one's internal standards of how they ought to behave. And so instead of showing that impulse, they actually generate the opposite response. So this happens when a one might be kind of angry or irritated, but they don't want to show it. So they're kind of, sort of tightly polite to you. And, oh, no, it's no problem. It's no problem. And you get this sense that it kind of is a problem. Like you can kind of feel their anger underneath it. There's a sort of air of this kind of judgment, and you're not really sure what to make of it. And so there's a sense of, oh, maybe this person's not being completely authentic because they're not actually showing what they truly feel. And in fact, when the Type 1 moves on their connecting line to the Type 4, they can recover this sense of authenticity. And when they move to Type 7, they can generate these feelings and share them in real time, more spontaneously, which is one of the qualities of the 7. But in any event, I think that this defense mechanism of reaction formation, which is so core to the Type 1 personality, may actually be part of or contributing to this question of Hillary Clinton's trustworthiness and her authenticity. Now, this sets aside actually legitimate questions about her honesty, which I'm raising in the related blog post. Now consider this Vox interview in which she also displays a little bit of that reaction formation and continues along the theme of trustworthiness.
That none of us have done what we should have done in being really straightforward about what we know and what we don't know, and being willing to say, we reported that story last week, it turns out we were wrong. Or we didn't tell you everything that you might have needed to make a decision. I've argued with network executives for 25 years that somebody is going to really figure out that running a news program where you actually say, hey, we got that wrong, or, I'm not so sure what he just said was right. In fact, I don't think it is, and let me tell you why, and here's the evidence to that effect, where somebody is trying to pull the curtain back, as opposed to everybody go to their corners, whether it's ratings or whether it's an ideological position. That's really what we're about, as opposed to, hey, we've got a really solemn responsibility, and we're going to level with you. You may not like what you hear, but we're going to try to the best of our ability not to get it wrong, and when we do, we're going to be the first to tell you.
Clinton displays a number of Type 1 qualities in her call for higher standards. She frames it as a solemn responsibility to level with people, which is a very Type 1 way of saying it. And the standards she's talking about are, in effect, transparency. She's saying that people ought to be more straightforward, and they ought to come forward when they've made a mistake about whether they've given enough information or what they know and they don't know. And I think people who are detractors of Clinton's or critics of Clinton's are going to say, well, she's being so hypocritical here because she's directing so much of this talk to the media and maybe the political establishment. But what about her own campaign? It seems to be beset with problems about dribbling information and kind of reframing or spinning the truth. And so I think there's this question about, is she being hypocritical? And ones can actually really struggle with hypocrisy. What's happening for the one is that they're trying so hard to be perfect that they can be really sensitive to criticism. They can be really sensitive to feeling condemned or wrong or evil, both within themselves and other people making these criticisms. And as a result, can kind of skate the truth a bit, kind of maybe not necessarily be completely forthcoming when they're trying to give this image of actually being perfect and being good. And it's also related to this sense of, let me tell other people what I really need to hear. There's this kind of sense in which it gets projected out. And so all these standards that other people need to be living up to are really things that maybe I myself should actually be living up to. And so the ones can kind of struggle with this. Now, to be fair, Clinton actually includes herself, especially at the beginning of the clip when she's talking about these high standards. She says, none of us have done what we should have done in being, and she almost says honest there, but then she says, in being really straightforward about what we know and don't know. Listen again to the clip.
None of us have done what we should have done in being really straightforward about what we know and what we don't know.
I think this was a somewhat candid moment for Clinton because she almost, in effect, confesses here that she herself hasn't done enough in being straightforward. And had she actually used the word honest, I think it probably would have been problematic for her campaign because she's already beset by all of these questions about her dishonesty and this public perception of her being untrustworthy. And I think what Clinton is pointing to is, in part, well, hey, maybe I'm operating in an atmosphere in which I can't be coming forward as much as I'd like to say I've made a mistake. Now, I'm not so sure that that's completely true. I actually think that's part of the Enneagram Type 1 pattern, is to feel that they can't be candid about their mistakes all the time because there's a sense in which they feel so much responsibility to be perfect. Notice also how Clinton frames the standards she's calling for in terms of right versus wrong. Right versus wrong is the Type 1's natural and habitual focus of attention. By this I mean this is how Type 1s sort information in the world. And so she's saying that media outlets, for example, could say, hey, we got that wrong in this instance. Or, hey, I don't know if that person is right about that. Let me show you the evidence. Let me fact check this in real time. Let me correct the record. And so this focus of attention of right versus wrong is woven in to the very standard she's calling for. But there's another Type 1 feature here, which is about apology and forgiveness. Type 1s, it turns out, can often be very forgiving when people come forward and say, hey, I made a mistake. Hey, I'm striving to do better. Ones, because they're striving so hard to be good, can really appreciate when people are candid about their mistakes. And I think the emotional driver of the Type 1 pattern is anger or wrath. Now this is a particular kind of anger. It's an anger against anger. This is what allows the one to shape their impulses into something more civilized. And so, in effect, oftentimes ones are trying not to be angry. Every once in a while, however, this anger actually spills out. The impulse gets discharged in real time. And in a way, this can lend a kind of air of authenticity to that moment of anger. Consider these two very well-known clips in which Hillary Clinton displays her anger.
What does Mr. Clinton think through the mouth of Mrs. Clinton? And what does Mr. Mutombo think on this situation? Thank you very much.
Wait, you want me to tell you what my husband thinks? My husband is not the Secretary of State. I am. So you ask my opinion, I will tell you my opinion. I'm not going to be channeling my husband.
Secretary Clinton, if you were tackling climate change, will you act on your words and address fossil fuel money in the future in your campaign?
Yes, I do not. I have money for people who work for fossil fuel companies. I am so sick. I am so sick of the Sanders campaign lying about me. I'm sick of it.
I agree with you, Sanders, on the
Whatever you think about the justification of Hillary Clinton's anger, notice the tone and the tenor of it. It's about moral indignation, a very type 1 pattern. In the first case, she has this kind of biting sarcasm to it. And in the second clip, there's a kind of finger-wagging self-righteousness, as if, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore. You got this wrong and it needs to be corrected. And in both clips, there's a kind of spilling over of the one's frustration, a kind of venting of their frustration. And yet, underlying all of this is a genuine desire to be perfect, to make others perfect, to hold everybody to a higher standard. Consider this clip with Hillary Clinton being interviewed on The Morning Joe show.
This has kind of come to me over the last months because, you know, it is painful. It's hurtful to have people say, oh, I don't trust her, or don't know why she's doing it. And it suddenly struck me, well, you know, maybe there is this underlying question, like, is she doing it for herself or is she really in it for us? And I've always thought of myself as being service-oriented, always believed that I was in it for, you know, trying to help people get a better shot in life, even the odds. And I think I'm just going to keep reaching out, talking about what I've done, what I will do, and making the case that people can count on me because they always have in the past.
So somebody said something else very funny today when I said, she just seems different. And she seemed different this week. She's more relaxed. She's what we've been saying all along she should be. And it's really surprising. And I think it was Halpern on the set said, no, the Clintons actually have a 30-year history of near-death experiences and then resurrections. So the question is, why don't you just make it easier on yourself and forget the Lazarus routine and just make it easy from the beginning for your supporters and friends?
Okay, let's do that from now on. Okay, I like that. I like that alternative.
Yeah, right.
That's an interesting observation, and there may be some truth to it,
Right.
because, you know, part of it is, though, I always feel like I am carrying a big weight of responsibility for so many people. I really do have this sense that a lot of people are counting on me, a lot of people are expecting me to help them, a lot of people are really in my corner, and I think that does sometimes get me a little bit you know, tensed up, to be honest.
Right.
You know, I think I'm afflicted by the responsibility.
Very much in keeping with the type 1 pattern, Hillary Clinton cites her genuine desire to try to do good for people as the motive underlying her political campaign. Ones tend to be very modest, very hardworking, and very honest about that. They tend not to be out searching for fame and glory or for power. They're genuinely trying to make improvements. And this is one of the better features that the one can bring forward, certainly in our political process. Now, it's also related to the one feeling this weight of responsibility, this feeling like, hey, I'm out here to try to do good, and sometimes I feel like I'm the only one out there fighting the good fight. And Hillary Clinton has this rather poignant moment of self-reflection when she's talking about feeling like the weight of the world is on her shoulders. And ones so often make a similar report. Now notice that this moment comes after she's feeling relaxed and she laughs, and so I think there's a kind of revelation that's happening. There's a kind of really authentic moment in which she brings forward even a kind of a touch of sadness, which is so often with the one that, we really could do better and we could strive to be better, and how come we can't make the world a better place for everybody. And in a blog post about presidential personalities, I write more about how Donald Trump runs the Type 8 Ennea style, Barack Obama is a Type 9, and Hillary Clinton is a Type 1. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find a link to that post below. You can also check out my website, livingenneagram.com, to learn more about the Enneagram teachings generally and to discover your own Ennea type.